And of course also, Sweden is a small country, we need every immigrant we can get. I heard somebody say that in the coming 20 years, the amount of immigrants in the Swedish population will be 20%. So it's going up and up and up because there are so few children being born, so we have to rely on immigration. And our government now, which is the conservative government, said we want to introduce people faster on the labor market. Those who come to Sweden cannot, the general time before somebody was on the Swedish labor market was 7 years. You had to wait 7 years before you got your first job. So the government says now, no, that's no good. You have to learn Swedish quickly, and you have to do it preferably at a workplace, so that you learn the language of the labor force as such. So there are huge schemes for this as well. Now I'll go more into the VET, vocational education and training. And of course there are many different types. In the formal system, we have the upper secondary initial VET, and that is then delivered through municipal adult education, with the guidelines from the Swedish National Agency of Education. That's the same for everybody. But if you want to just take some courses from this program and some courses from that program, you can combine. If the labor force needs that type of very specific types of course or courses, then you can actually combine. But everybody knows what it's about. They know this is a plumber or this is a baker, and maybe you want to combine something in a new way. Then there's supplementary education, which is, I'll come back to that, and also some post-secondary training. And we have an old tradition, 100 years back, of folk high schools, which I'll also go into. Then, of course, there's also VET for adults through joint training boards, and they're run by the labor market, and I'll come back to that. The adult VET programs of course, have individual courses based on the need of the individual. It's actually the individual who wants to do something, so then they can have a certain offer. This is delivered like an apprenticeship training, and this can lead to a certification, and it takes then about 3 years, a 3-year diploma, or equivalent of a 3-year diploma. It's very flexible. It's a very demand-driven curricula, and it's not always as clear as what the younger students do. You know, you follow this pathway and then you become a plumber. It can be done in a different way. Then these business labor joint training boards at sectoral level. There are not so many, but you can find some, for example, in the electrical engineering and in the building sector you will find this as well. And here, you will also very often find the validation and recognition of former competencies that you have achieved either in working life or if you have studied abroad, then this can be recognized by these boards. Of course, recognition is also in the formal system now. You can have, for example, where I work, we have our own company, actually, where people can go and have some type of recognition, for example, in the building trade, or nurses. Very often, healthcare assistants can, maybe they've been working for 20 years and they want a certificate, so they can have this knowledge recognized and then maybe do just 1 year courses, and then they'll get the certificate for the formal system. Supplementary education, there are very few, so I think I will just go through that. It's outside the public education system, and it's more about fine arts and music and so on, maybe pilot training, which is very specific, and where you have to pay. Because all adult education is free, so but some you have to pay. Post-secondary training, also not so many, but you can also provide further training in a profession, and these are normally 1.5 years long programs. And this is also funded under the municipal adult education framework, so it's the municipal tax that pays for this. But it's under the quality assurance of the National Agency for Higher Vocational Education, where where they also have this observatory that you were talking about, so that you can find out what is needed. The Basque visit to Sweden also concentrated on folk high schools, so I will speak a little bit about folk high schools. These are very, very independent adult education colleges, and they date back at least 100 years back. It started like liberal folk movements, for example, to prevent people from drinking too much. So you had these folk liberal movements starting schools and colleges. These are very free in the way they can deliver training and education, and they can decide independently what courses they provide, and also what teaching methods are used. So it's a very flexible system, based also on a very democratic way of delivering, where the individual is really important and you can form your own pathway. And the programs may vary from maybe 1 year long to up to 3 years. And like you see, for example, specialized handicrafts, recreation leadership, sign language interpretation, and very often that type of occupation that you won't find in the formal system, then that can be delivered through the folk liberal movement. There's also a very democratic approach in the way that, for example, disabled people or people with an immigrant background, they can find it easier to actually gain this knowledge through the vet folk high schools. You have to be 18 years old to enter into folk high school to actually receive the upper secondary level. There are certain exceptions from this, where even younger children who have big problems, maybe they can also go to folk high school. There's significant state funding for this. It's part of the political system. It's very important that we must have the folk high schools. There are 18 different associations and a lot of smaller associations, for example, those who deliver study circles. I think something like 280,000 study circles were delivered last year for well over 1.5 million people. So a lot of Swedish people take part in these study circles during the evening and so on. And the money is distributed through the Swedish National Council for Adult Education, which is really an association of the associations. And then they have to show the government what has been done for the money. But this is also a way of actually lifelong learning, where you have people from the age of 18 to 85, 90, as long as you live, you can go to a study circle or a folk high school. Something which was also introduced by the government during the crisis was the higher vocational education. And this was absolutely new to Sweden. We didn't have anything like this. It's to provide training to meet labor market demand for specialist know-how in various sectors. So it's the past level of upper secondary school, and the thing is that it's designed in consultation with employers and delivered by various education and training providers. From 1 year up to 3 years, the most common is 2 years. A third of that time is actually done in working life as working life learning. And this is very often the entry or the key to a new job. A lot of those people who take part are employed, but they just want to increase their level of knowledge so that they are not risking losing their job. But you also have the young people, 23, 24, 25 years old, maybe finished a pathway in social science, and now they want to go into that. And we haven't had that possibility before in Sweden, so this is very, very popular, about 40,000 students each year at the moment. And it's also, the quality assurance is done by the National Agency for Higher Vocational Education. So what actions have we taken the recent years? Well, we have had to look at the pedagogy, the way it's delivered to adults, the way the learning strategies to suit each individual, because we can't just say to everybody, go into a classroom and sit down and do what you did 15 years ago, because they won't like it. So each individual really has to find the right pathway to be interested in lifelong learning. And how do you make people interested? Well, you have to put a lot of money into guidance. Career guidance is very important. So in the Swedish system, there's a right by law to have access to guidance. You don't have to go if you don't want to, but you have the right by law to have guidance.